Grandma discovered a waitress with her daughter's eyes. What happened next was life-changing. Betty Wilson took her usual seat in the Cozy Corner Diner, the local hub of Maplewood, where the smell of pancakes danced in the air and laughter bubbled like the coffee in her cup. Today, however, felt like a jolt of electricity. She glanced up, and there stood Lily, an innocent young waitress with a spark in her eye that made Betty's heart race. Those eyes, they were unmistakably familiar. They belonged to her daughter, Amy, who had been gone for over 20 years. Gratitude and heartache clashed within her. How could someone so young remind her so vividly of the child she lost? Betty looked down at her hands. As memories came flooding back, the weight of loss was palpable. 2 decades of grief piled on her heart like stones. She missed Amy's laughter, her sweet voice, the simple joys of being a mom. Now here was Lily, her doppelganger, an echo of everything Betty had lost. In that moment, she realized that her past wasn't as distant as it seemed. "Good morning, ma'am. Can I get you anything today?" Lily chirped, her bright smile lighting the room. Betty swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "What's your name, dear?" "Lily," the waitress beamed, stepping closer. "It's busy today, but I love it. It brings people together." And Betty felt the tug of connection deep within her heart. Tactile memories of holding her daughter in her arms came rushing back. The tiny fingers, the unstoppable giggles, the unbreakable bond they shared. "Lily, have you ever felt like you've met someone before?" Betty asked tentatively, her heart thumping in her chest. Lily's smile faltered for the briefest moment, a flash of recognition. Then she replied, "Sometimes. My adoptive mom said I was special, but I always wondered about my biological family." A shiver ran down Betty's spine. This was no ordinary conversation. It was an unraveling thread that led straight to a truth she hadn't dared imagine. They talked at length, the atmosphere buzzing with revelations as Lily shared bits of her life, unaware of the storm gathering around them. The deeper they dove, the more Betty was convinced that this young woman in front of her was her granddaughter, Amy's life preserved in a stranger's smile. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. But just as light filled her heart, a dark cloud loomed just overhead. The community had always been close-knit, but they were quick to judge and slow to forgive. When word spread about Betty's connection to Lily, whispers began to swirl like autumn leaves. Resentments blossomed, and soon Betty felt isolation creeping back, clinging to her with icy fingers. At the Maplewood Harvest Festival, tensions ran high. Fractured bonds and buried secrets threatened to surface, and the crowd felt electric, teetering between healing and heartache. Would she step into the light and embrace her past, or retreat into the shadows of fear? Betty stood at the center, nerves dancing in her stomach. Her choice could redefine everything she thought she knew. With people watching, brimming with unexpected hope and simmering tension, would she have the strength to bridge the gap between past and future? Would the haunting shadows allow her a second chance with the family she thought she had lost forever? Betty's heart pounded as she stood before the crowd, the festival lights twinkling above like stars trapped in a jar. She felt all eyes on her, a mix of curiosity and skepticism weaving through the air. Overhead, the chatter hummed like a swarm of bees, but all she could hear was the thudding of her own heartbeat and the distant laughter of children. Memories of Amy, warm and fleeting, twinkled in her mind, and she knew she had to act. "Excuse me," she finally called out, her voice rising above the cacophony. A hush fell, and all eyes turned toward her. "I have something I want to share." The gasps that rippled through the spectators were palpable. They had heard the rumors. They had seen Lily behind the counter at the diner, laughing with customers, serving pancakes with a smile that mirrored the face of someone they thought they knew. But to see Betty, the woman who had known only loss for so long, standing there, this was new. "I know many of you are curious about Lily," she began, her voice shaky but steadied by determination. "You all know my story. 20 years without my daughter, Amy. But just this morning, I came face to face with an undeniable truth." As the words spilled from her, she saw faces crinkle into expressions of disbelief and compassion. "Lily has eyes just like Amy's," she continued, "and I believe she is my granddaughter." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jack Thompson, the town's unofficial historian and a man who had long held a memory of Amy within his heart, squinted at Betty. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, we're connected. Lily deserves to know about her past, about who she truly is. I might have lost a daughter, but that doesn't mean I won't fight to know my family again. The community has to look at what this really means. We cannot cling to old sorrow while new life stands before us." As Betty spoke, she noticed Lily standing a few feet away, a mixture of awe and confusion on her face. Their eyes met, and for a moment there was a quiet understanding that passed between them. The weight of their shared history, though unspoken, hung in the air like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. But not everyone was ready to embrace change. The whispers grew louder, dissent weaving its way through the crowd. "She's just looking for attention," one voice called, while another chimed in, "That can't be true." Betty felt her heart sink. She was chill in the warmth of the sun, vulnerable yet defiant. She had waited too long to let fear dictate her choices. "Please, I don't want to fight. I want to heal. I want us all to heal," she pleaded. "This is not just about me or Lily. This is about family, our family, whatever shape it takes." She could see narrow minds edging towards closure, misunderstandings creeping into the light. But deep inside her, hope surged. Maybe, just maybe, the heart of Maplewood would beat for love and connection rather than judgment. Lily stepped forward, her eyes wide. "I want to know you, Betty," she said, her voice steady. "I've always felt a missing piece of my heart. Maybe this is it." As Betty locked eyes with her, she felt a flicker of warmth, a spark of something new and bright emerging from the heavy fog of their shared loss. But the real struggle was just beginning. Would the town accept this revelation, or would they continue to let old wounds fester? A child broke free from the crowd, running towards Betty, catching her skirt with tiny hands. The child's innocence cut through the tension. "Are you really Grandma?" she asked, eyes gleaming with wonder. Betty crouched down, meeting the child's gaze. "I just might be." A smile broke across her face, but behind it lay the uncertainty of what was to come. Fear and exhilaration tangled together. With the murmur of the crowd rising again, she knew, deep down, the change was at hand. What would happen next? Would they embrace the unexpected connection, or leave it to wither under the weight of doubt? The answers hung, delicate as a summer breeze, waiting for someone to take the first step forward. Lily's clear voice cut through the murmurs swirling around them. "I want to meet my family," she declared, her eyes bright, betraying a rare courage. The weight of that simple statement reverberated through the crowd. Betty saw surprise flicker on many faces, transforming skepticism into something softer, curiosity mingling with hope. "Just give me a chance," Betty said, standing taller. "I know I'm asking you to consider a story that might feel impossible, but I can't stand by while my granddaughter is here, right in front of me, and we pretend that our lives don't intertwine." At that moment, Betty noticed Jack Thompson stepping forward, his brow furrowed, trying to piece together the puzzle. "If you're saying this is true, Betty, why now? Why not sooner?" His tone was genuinely inquiring, not confrontational. "Because," she replied, her chest tightening. "For 20 years I've grieved. I was afraid to reconnect. But this morning, it all changed. I found old photographs, messages, evidence that ties Lily to Amy. I was frozen in my sadness, but seeing her today broke that ice." The crowd shifted, impatience blurring into intrigue. Was it possible? Could a chance encounter shatter years of sorrow? "Do you really think I'm your granddaughter?" Lily asked, her voice smaller now, almost vulnerable. "I know it," Betty whispered, tears welling. "Your smile, the shape of your face, the laughter in your eyes. I see Amy. And she has been waiting for me to find her family, waiting for me to let this love in." The child still clutched Betty's skirt, eyes wide with innocence, as if she sensed the turning tide. "Will you tell us stories about Grandma?" she asked, a slight plea hidden in her words. "Of course, sweetheart," Betty replied, her heart swelling. "So many stories, filled with laughter and love, stories that will help us understand where we all come from." The tension in the air shifted, balloons of opposition slowly deflating. Betty saw whispers transform into nodding heads in the crowd. The compassion of the town began to bloom alongside apprehension. But not everyone was sold. "It sounds too good to be true," someone in the back called out, still clutching to doubt. "What if you're wrong about all this?" Betty cringed at the reminder of how fragile her newfound hope was. She turned to face the voice, ready to respond with her heart. "It is a risk, I admit, but isn't it worth exploring? Each of us carries wounds, and yet here we stand. Maybe healing starts with a single conversation." The murmur of the crowd quieted again, thickening the air with hesitation. Betty felt Lily beside her, the silent promise lingering. Was this just the beginning of something extraordinary? "Let's meet, sometime," Lily suggested softly, her determination winning over uncertainty. "You and me, and maybe the rest of the family." The suggestion hung in the air, floating amid the festival lights. Betty sensed the crowd leaning in, eager to hear more, to know what would unfold next. Perhaps they shared a collective breath, the joy of possibilities beginning to ignite where loss had once taken root. With a gentle squeeze of the child's hand, Betty turned back to the crowd. "We can navigate this together. Just let's take it one step at a time." As she spoke, the weight of old disappointments began to lift. Hope surged again. All around her, it felt like Maplewood was warming to the idea of embracing change, however cautious. But would it last? Would they nurture the connection, or let fears drown it once more? The festival lights flickered, and in that moment, the path ahead shimmered, uncertain, yet inviting. Just then, a thunderous clap of thunder rumbled in the distance, stirring up the air with a breath of rain. Would it wash away their fragile new beginnings, or cleanse the slate for something much brighter? Just as the thunder rumbled, a sudden shower of rain began to fall, the droplets tapping rhythmically against the festival tents. The air was electric, filled with the promise of change. Betty felt the cool moisture on her skin, a refreshing contrast to the warmth building inside her. She longed for connection, yet feared it deeply. How could she navigate this delicate territory? Lily glanced up at Betty, her face illuminated with childlike wonder. "Are we going to meet the rest of the family soon?" The innocence in her voice cut through the tension like a sunbeam through clouds. Betty knelt down to her level, brushing back a strand of hair from Lily's face. "I hope so, dear, but we have to take our time. Family is complicated sometimes." A collective hush swept over the crowd as uncertainty gripped them once more. The rain began to fall harder, but the festival lights, still glowing, seemed to sparkle in defiance, amplifying the atmosphere of possibility. Betty could see the mix of emotions on faces around her: curiosity, hope, and that lingering skepticism. "What if it doesn't work out?" a woman asked hesitantly from the back. "What if you're wrong?" Betty felt her heart sink, but she couldn't let doubt overshadow the moment. "Every relationship requires trust," she said firmly, her voice steady. "Trust is built over time. It won't be easy, but isn't it worth the fight to bring love back into our lives?" Jack stepped forward again, a thoughtful expression crossing his features. "I've seen families torn apart. It's not simple to just jump back in. There will be pain." Lily's eyes flickered over to Jack, as if she could sense the weight of his words. "But if we don't try, we'll never know, right?" she countered, her innocence speaking louder than the doubts of the adults around her. Betty glanced at Lily, filled with pride. This little girl had courage beyond her years. "Exactly, sweetheart. There's a chance for joy among the pain, a chance for healing." Another clap of thunder resonated through the sky, prompting a few gasps. The atmosphere felt charged, almost magical, as if the storm outside mirrored the whirlwind of emotions within. This was a moment suspended in time. Then Betty spotted Mrs. Green, a longtime resident of Maplewood, edging her way forward through the crowd. "I think," she began, her voice warm and inviting, "that we all have our own histories and our own fears, but I've seen the goodness that comes when people come together. Maybe it's time for us to lean into that goodness." A low murmur spread through the crowd, signs of understanding shimmering in the faces around her. Betty felt the small threads of connection weaving together in this moment, beginning to create something new, something beautiful. "I'll help," Jack said bravely. "Maybe we can set up some meetings. It's a step forward, at least." Cheers erupted, only to be hushed again as they remembered the downpour outside. The rain splashed persistently, creating a symphony of sound around them, as if nature itself cheered for their resolve. "Now, how about some stories?" Betty suggested, redirecting their focus. An evening to share laughter and memories with Lily. Lily's eyes sparkled with anticipation. The tension began to soften, optimism softly enveloping the group. Hope blossomed. Yet in the shadows, lingering questions remained. Would this newfound energy last? As they faced the uncertain future, would they brave the storms together? The ceremony under the festival lights felt like a promise, one that could weather the coming rain. The crowd slowly began to disperse, but instead of fear, they held on to something new, possibility. And as Betty wrapped her arms around Lily, she realized the journey was just beginning. They had taken the first step, but what awaited them on the path ahead? Would the storm strengthen their bond or tear it apart? A distant rumble echoed again, shaking the resolve that had begun to crystallize. Sneaking from the back, another figure emerged, a girl with familiar eyes, a memory from long ago, crying out to be seen. Would this surprise shatter their fragile hope, or would it illuminate their way? The rain poured down in sheets, creating a curtain that blurred the world around them. As the festival atmosphere dimmed slightly under the weight of the storm, Betty stood frozen, her heart racing. The girl who had emerged from the shadows was someone she'd never expected to see again. With each step closer, her breath grew heavier. Is That, she whispered, hardly daring to believe her own eyes. Lily tugged gently at her sleeve. Mom, who is she? Betty struggled to find words. The girl before her had the same dark hair and deep, searching eyes as her late daughter, Emma. It felt as if the universe had conspired in the midst of chaos to bring back a piece of her past. But this girl wasn't just a memory, she was flesh and blood, and the way she looked at Betty filled the air with questions that needed to be asked. Are you Emma? Betty stammered, disbelief mixing with the long-buried hope that flickered within her. The girl hesitated, wringing her hands nervously, her expression troubled. No, I'm not her, but people say I look just like her. My name is Chloe. All at once, Betty felt a whirlpool of emotions. Chloe's voice was a song from a forgotten time, yet filled with haunting sorrow and a longing for connection. The once familiar warmth started to seep back into her heart, but another part of her felt fear. Could this girl hold the answers to the questions she had buried? Questions about loss, love, and family? Are you Emma? Betty stammered, disbelief mixing with the long-buried hope that flickered within her. The girl hesitated, wringing her hands nervously, her expression troubled. No, I'm not her, but people say I look just like her. My name is Chloe. All at once, Betty felt a whirlpool of emotions. Chloe's voice was a song from a forgotten time, yet filled with haunting sorrow and a longing for connection. The once familiar warmth started to seep back into her heart, but another part of her felt fear. Could this girl hold the answers to the questions she had buried? Questions about loss, love, and family? Why do you look so much like her? Betty finally managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid to wake the memories she tried to keep at bay. The girl hesitated, wringing her hands nervously, her expression troubled. No, I'm not her, but people say I look just like her. My name is Chloe. All at once, Betty felt a whirlpool of emotions. Chloe's voice was a song from a forgotten time, yet filled with haunting sorrow and a longing for connection. The once familiar warmth started to seep back into her heart, but another part of her felt fear. Could this girl hold the answers to the questions she had buried? Questions about loss, love, and family? Why do you look so much like her? Betty finally managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid to wake the memories she tried to keep at bay. Chloe shifted her weight, glancing at Lily, who watched on with wide eyes, full of curiosity. I've heard stories about your family, about Emma too. I thought maybe I could find you. A ripple of gasps swept through the crowd. Betty could feel the weight of their eyes, the mixture of interest and worry as people leaned in to listen. But for her, it was more than just a curious audience. This was her life, her heart laid bare before witnesses she hardly knew. Find me? Betty was puzzled. Why would you want that? Because, Chloe said, her voice growing steadier, I want to know who she was. I never got the chance to meet her, but I feel this connection. I need to understand. Lily looked back and forth, sensing the emotional storm brewing between the adults. Mom, can she stay with us? She asked innocently, as if this young woman could fill the void left by tragedy. Betty's heart swelled at Lily's instinct. I'm not sure, love. The thought terrified and thrilled her all at once. She needed time to process, to understand who Chloe was and where she fit into the tangled mess of her family's past. Chloe took a step forward, her genuine eyes reflecting vulnerability. I'm not trying to take anyone's place. I just thought maybe we could share stories. Maybe it could help us all heal. Could it? The thought crackled in the air around them. A chance for the old wounds to start stitching together. And yet, Doubt loomed like the storm overhead. What if Chloe brought more pain instead of healing? As the crowd murmured with disbelief and intrigue, Betty felt a moment of clarity. "All right," she said softly, her voice trembling with hesitation, but layered with a growing determination. "Let's talk." Just as she extended her hand toward Chloe, the wind howled, and another bolt of lightning lit up the sky, illuminating the path ahead, yet shrouded in uncertainty. The rain kept falling, drenching them all in its relentless embrace. And as they stepped together into the next moment, Betty couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was far from over. Would this encounter bridge the gaps or deepen the chasms? With every heartbeat, the weight of what was to come wrapped itself around her like the storm, heavy yet promising. And just behind them, the crowd held their breath, waiting to see what would unfold next. The moment Betty extended her hand, the air pulsed with uncertainty. She felt her heart thumping in rhythm with the rain, each drop echoing the fear and exhilaration swirling inside her. Chloe shifted closer, edging her own hand out, and in that split second, the world felt quieter, as if even the storm held its breath. As their fingers touched, it was like reconnecting a broken circuit. A jolt of warm energy flashed between them. With that simple contact, emotions flooded in: nostalgia, sadness, hope, and a yearning for understanding. Betty met Chloe's gaze, those familiar dark eyes piercing through layers of doubt. "Let's find somewhere private," she suggested, barely above a whisper. The thought of the onlookers felt overwhelming, as if an audience was watching the unraveling of her heart. "I know a cafe just around the corner," Chloe replied, her voice steadying with each word. "It's quiet." Betty glanced at Lily, who looked back with wide, trusting eyes. "Okay, honey, let's go." She grabbed her daughter's hand, feeling the small warmth of Lily's palm grounding her as they started to move. With Chloe leading the way, they made their way through the thinning crowd, the rain still hammering above them, but the tension inside Betty slowly lifting. They entered the cafe, the bell above the door ringing like a signal that it was time for everything to change. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with the dampness, creating a sense of both comfort and urgency. They found a small table in a corner, and as they settled in, Betty could see Chloe visibly relax, her shoulders dropping slightly. "Thank you for talking to me," Chloe said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I really want to learn about Emma, about my connection to her." Betty took a deep breath, feeling an almost maternal instinct to protect Chloe, even though she barely knew her. I don't even know where to start," she admitted, feeling a lump in her throat. "Just start with something." Chloe leaned forward, her eyes filled with sincerity. "I'm here to listen." As Betty began to recount little stories about Emma, her laughter, how she could light up a room, and her love for dancing in the rain, she saw Chloe's expression shift. Each story pulled them closer, bridging the gap of time and grief that hung between them. Emma loved music, Betty recalled, her voice tentative yet growing stronger, spilling over with memories she had tucked away for too long. Chloe's eyes sparkled, and Betty noticed a tear slip down her cheek. "I never knew her, but I feel like I did, somehow." Tears threatened to spill from Betty's eyes as well. The pain was still there, raw and fresh, but Chloe's presence felt like a kindred spirit, a link to Emma that she never expected would come back to her in such a profound way. "Why did you look for me?" Betty finally asked, vulnerable yet intrigued. "What made you think I'd want to know you?" Chloe hesitated, glancing down at her hands. "I lost my parents, too. I needed to fill that void, to find out where I belong. I thought, if I could find people connected to Emma, maybe I could find part of myself." The weight of Chloe's words wrapped around Betty,
a haunting reminder of the shared sorrow that accompanied loss. Just then, the cafe door swung open, and a gust of wind swept through the room, chilling the air. Betty's heart raced again, something shifting inside her. Could both of them start to heal as they shared their stories?
Just then, she spotted someone at the door, a figure that made her heart drop. "Mom?" Lily's small voice broke through the tension, pointing at the newcomer behind the glass. "Isn't that—" Betty's breath hitched, her gut twisting with a mix of anxiety and dread. Oh no. What could it mean that this person had arrived now, at this crucial moment? Would their presence unravel everything, just as it felt like it was starting to stitch back together? The noise of the cafe faded into a dull thrum, and all Betty could focus on was the undeniable question forming in her mind. Could this journey forward be derailed before it even began? The figure at the door stepped inside, shaking raindrops from a blue coat. For a heartbeat, the world paused. The cafe's warmth and the lively conversations blurred into the background as Betty's heart raced. It couldn't be. Or could it? Is that— Chloe's voice trailed off, and she turned to Betty, searching for answers. Lily's innocent excitement shifted to uncertainty as she whispered, "Mom, it looks like Grandma." The resemblance was unmistakable. The same cascading hair, the same gentle lines etched on a familiar face. It was as if time had defied itself, bringing them a ghost from the past. "Betty?" The woman's voice echoed, breaking through the fog of disbelief. It was soft, still holding the vibrancy of youth, but with a slight tremor that spoke of age and worry. Betty's chest tightened. "Mom?" In that single word, years of estrangement flooded back, memories of laughter and warmth mixed with abandonment and hurt. She hadn't seen her mother in over a decade. The silence had seeped in like a slow poison, and now it felt as if the very ground beneath her was shifting. The cafe patrons quieted, whispers spread like ripples in a pond. All eyes were on Betty as she stood frozen, caught between the urge to rush forward and the instinct to retreat. "Betty, please." Her mother's eyes were wide with longing, almost pleading. "I've been looking for you." "What do you mean?" Betty managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper, emotion swelling within her. This wasn't how she had envisioned this moment, standing there with Chloe and Lily, as pieces of her past twisted violently into her present. "You left. You didn't even try to contact me." "I was lost," her mother admitted, tears shimmering in her eyes. "I thought it was best for you. But I've changed. I want to explain." Chloe shifted in her seat, clearly feeling the weight of the situation. She looked at Betty, her wide eyes inviting. "We're all about finding connections, right? Maybe it's time to hear her out." Betty felt torn. The warmth of the cafe contrasted sharply with the chill in her heart. She closed her eyes for a brief second, taking a deep breath to quell the rising tide of memories. A suburban home filled with echoing laughter. A sudden silence that followed the day her mother walked away. The cafe patrons quieted. Whispers spread like ripples in a pond. All eyes were on Betty as she stood frozen, caught between the urge to rush forward and the instinct to retreat. "Betty, please." Her mother's eyes were wide with longing, almost pleading. "I've been looking for you." "What do you mean?" Betty managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper, emotion swelling within her. This wasn't how she had envisioned this moment, standing there with Chloe and Lily, as pieces of her past twisted violently into her present. "You left. You didn't even try to contact me." "I was lost," her mother admitted, tears shimmering in her eyes. "I thought it was best for you. But I've changed. I want to explain." Chloe shifted in her seat, clearly feeling the weight of the situation. She looked at Betty, her wide eyes inviting. "We're all about finding connections, right? Maybe it's time to hear her out."
Betty felt torn. The warmth of the cafe contrasted sharply with the chill in her heart. She closed her eyes for a brief second, taking a deep breath to quell the rising tide of memories. A suburban home filled with echoing laughter. A sudden silence that followed the day her mother walked away.
The lump in her throat made it impossible to speak, yet the scene unfolding felt surreal, like the world was on pause. "You can't just walk back in after all this time," she finally said, voice shaky. "There are things you don't understand." "Then let me try," her mother responded, stepping closer, determination in her voice. "I can't change the past, but I want to be a part of your future." Betty's heart raced at the idea. Could she trust her mother again? Was this an opening, a chance at healing, or was it yet another door to be closed? Her gaze flickered to Chloe, whose fingers fidgeted anxiously on the table, and then to Lily, who watched the scene unfold with innocent curiosity. "What if I'm not ready?" Betty finally managed to say, feeling the weight of honesty surge through. As her mother opened her mouth to respond, Chloe interjected softly. "It's okay to not be ready. Just know that some connections are worth exploring, even if it's scary." Betty nodded slowly, feeling a strange blend of anger, love, and hope swirling inside her. The cafe held its breath as silence enveloped them. Her mother stood there, vulnerable and exposed, a lost piece of her history reaching out again. Would she take that leap of faith? But even as Betty's heart softened towards this unexpected chance, the door creaked open once more, and another figure stepped in. This time, Betty's breath hitched for a different reason. Is everything all right?" a man asked, glancing around the cafe as if seeking a familiar face. In that moment, uncertain currents shifted yet again, bringing forth a wave of confusion into the fragile restoration happening at the table. Who was this new arrival, and how would they affect what was already unraveling? Betty's mind raced as she confronted another layer of her past. What exactly was this new chapter going to reveal? Would she uncover even deeper ties that ran through her heart? The tension hung thick in the air, begging for resolution. Could they piece together something beautiful from this chaotic reunion? The cafe was a world of whispers and tightening throats, all eyes now drawn to the man who had just walked in. He looked out of place amidst the intimate chaos, drenched from the rain, but radiating an odd sense of authority. His gaze darted from table to table until it settled on Betty, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition. "Betty?" he said, clearly surprised. Panic seized her heart. The sudden familiarity unsettled her, even though she couldn't immediately place him. Was he just another customer, or was he someone from her past? Her mother shifted uneasily, the weight of history flooding the space between them like soot in an empty room. "Do you know him?" Chloe whispered to her, nudging her slightly. Betty shook her head, feeling a wave of unease wash over her. "No, I don't think so." "Are you sure?" Chloe pressed, trying to understand the unfolding drama. The man took a step closer. "Betty, it's me, Marcus. I didn't think I would see you here." It hit her like a punch. Marcus, her childhood friend, the one who was her rock during pretty awful times back then, the one who vanished, like her mother. The memories rushed back, bittersweet and painful. They had shared secrets, laughter, the wild dreams of youth, before life had sent them down different paths. "Marcus," she breathed his name, feeling the echo of lost friendship stir in her chest. "What are you doing here?" His eyes were warm, yet tinged with sadness. "I came back to find you. It's been too long. I've heard a lot about you." Betty could barely process his words. She felt as if the ground beneath her was slipping.
Here was her mother, a ghost from her past, and now Marcus, the friend who had loved her without conditions. With Lily still grasping her hand, Betty fought for composure. "This is a lot right now." "Please," Marcus implored, moving closer. "I need to explain why I left. I didn't want to turn my back on you." Everything felt too heavy, too complicated. Her mind raced, wanting to shut it all down. How could she bear the weight of both these connections after years of silence? Just when she was beginning to consider her mother's presence, someone from a past she thought was buried began to emerge. "You're home. We all want to be part of your life, Betty," her mother said gently, starting to reach out again. "Please don't close the door." Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. The cafe, once a comforting backdrop, now felt like a suffocating arena of longing and potential heartache. Betty glanced at Chloe, who nodded with reassurance, silently urging her to take the step. "It's just the three of us here," Chloe whispered. "You can choose how to move forward." Betty took a deep breath, feeling as if she stood on the edge of a precipice. One step could change everything. "Are you both really ready for this?" she asked, her voice quaking with uncertainty. The two met her gaze, nodding with conviction. Yet unanswered questions loomed thick above them, like storm clouds ready to break. What did it mean to start healing now, within this whirlwind of reconnecting? The air grew electric, a whisper of possibility mixed with fear hanging between them. "Let's talk," Betty finally said, her voice surprisingly steady. "But we need to be honest with each other." Both nodded again, ready and hopeful. And yet, what lay ahead felt more daunting than ever. Would they find clarity after all these years, or was this simply another chance to stir old wounds? For now, the cafe continued to hum with life, its warmth cradling the fragile truce they sought. Would they have the courage to dive deep into the healing waters of their shared history, or would they flounder in the darkness of unspoken fears?
Just as a fragile thread of connection began to emerge, the door opened again, the wind carrying in the sharp scent of rain along with another stranger, bright-eyed and filled with urgency. "Guys, you need to see this," the newcomer called out, looking more like news than an ordinary patron. Betty's heart raced anew. What could possibly be coming next? Betty's heart skipped a beat. The cafe's warm atmosphere suddenly felt colder, the voices around her dulling into a faint buzz. She turned, instinctively pulling Lily closer. The newcomer stood there, dripping rainwater onto the hardwood floor, eyes wide with the kind of revelation that felt monumental. "What do you mean?" Chloe asked, her curiosity piqued, eyebrows knitting in confusion. The stranger ran a hand through his messy hair, glancing around as if searching for the right words to convey the gravity of what he'd just experienced. Finally, he pointed toward the window, as if the sight outside would explain it all. "Did you see the lady sitting in the corner by herself?" he asked. "The older woman with the gray scarf." A ripple of unease flowed through Betty. She had noticed the woman, a well-dressed figure with her head bent, lost in thought. It was the kind of stillness that spoke of isolation and stories waiting to be told. "Yeah, what about her?" Betty's voice trembled, uncertainty lacing her words. "Heard her talking to the barista," he continued, his excitement building. "She mentioned someone named Martha. Did you say your mother was Martha?" Betty's stomach twisted. "Yes, but how do you know that?" The newcomer took a step closer, his eyes shining with an intensity that could not be ignored. "It's not just that. She said she used to work at the old diner over on Elm Street. I don't know if you remember that place, but she mentioned a daughter being taken away, a daughter with bright blue eyes." Betty's breath caught in her throat. The pieces of a puzzle she'd long abandoned began to scramble and collide in her mind, each fragment sharper and more unsettling than the last. "Who are you?" she managed to ask. "I'm Tim," he said, his expression softening slightly.
But more importantly, I just got off the phone with a friend who mentioned her. She's been looking for you. She thinks there's something you need to know about your mom's past." Marcus shifted beside her, stepping into the fray of emotions brewing under the calm facade of the cafe. "What are you saying? That older woman knows something about Betty's mother?" Tim nodded vigorously, his gaze flicking to the woman in the corner. "Yeah, and that's not all. She said she's seen her frequently over the years. She mentioned something about secrets." Silence enveloped the table, each one of them grappling with the implications of his words. Questions buzzed in Betty's head, questions she had long since buried. Why had her mother left? What secrets could unravel so many threads of their life? "Do you think she'd talk to us?"
Chloe asked, a hint of hope lacing her voice. "I think she might," Tim replied, "but it might take some convincing. You have to understand, for her, this is all delicate." Betty's heart raced, hope coalescing with dread. Here was an opportunity, a chance to piece together the fragments of her mother's past, but at what cost? She looked back at Marcus, found comfort in the steadiness of his presence. He'd vanished once before, but maybe now he'd help her dive into this turmoil, to pull out the truth they all seemed desperate for. "Let's talk to her," Betty decided, trembling with resolve. "This is bigger than any of us." With Tim leading the way, they approached the woman, the weight of the past heavy on their shoulders. As they neared, Betty's pulse quickened. Everything could change with a single word, a single revelation. But did she truly want to know the depths of her mother's history? What would they discover if they dared to ask? Would the truth bring healing or tear the fragile strands of connection apart once more? The cafe went quiet as they reached the woman. The world around them faded into a hushed anticipation. "Excuse me?" Tim began, his voice steady yet tinged with urgency. Betty held her breath, ready to leap head first into the unknown. What would happen next? The woman looked up slowly, her gaze meeting Betty's. There was a flicker of recognition in her eyes, a spark that lit the corners of a dusty memory. "Betty?" she whispered, her voice almost lost beneath the thrum of the cafe. Betty's heart raced. "Do you know me?" The question tumbled out before she could catch it, raw and filled with a mix of hope and trepidation. "Yes," the woman breathed, straightening her posture as if the past was rising to meet her. "I knew your mother." A hush swept through the area, the stakes rising. Marcus and Chloe stood close, their presence a steadying force, as if they themselves could shield Betty from the impact of whatever revelation lay ahead. Lily squeezed her hand, wide-eyed in anticipation. "Who are you?" Betty asked, searching the woman's face for answers. "What do you know about her?" "My name is Helen," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I was a dear friend of your mother's, Martha. We went through quite a lot together, long before you were born." Betty felt a surge of emotions, confusion, anger, longing. But why did she leave? Why didn't she come back? Helen's expression softened. "Betty, your mother was caught in the storm of her own pain. She loved you more than you can imagine, but at the time she felt she was protecting you, protecting herself." "What do you mean?" Betty pressed, desperate for clarity, for answers that might ease the weight of her shattered past. There were things she couldn't cope with, losses, choices she regretted. She thought leaving was the best way, but it broke her heart. Tears welled up in Betty's eyes. So she never wanted to be away?
"No," Helen said, her voice firm yet gentle. "I'll always remember how she grieved for you. Her heart was shattered, Betty. She didn't want you to suffer for her mistakes." The truth hung heavy, the tension around them simmering. Betty felt a mix of empathy and sorrow. Her mother, a woman she had shunned for years, had been haunted by her own demons. And in that moment, She understood that both of them, mother and daughter, had been lost for too long. "Help me understand how I can reach her," Betty implored desperately, fighting the urge to retreat into feelings of bitterness. "I want to know her, but how?" Helen nodded, her expression earnest. "We can talk again. I can help connect you. But back then, it was complicated, and we need to tread carefully. Maybe together we can begin to heal those wounds." Betty's heart fluttered with hope, but also fear. Was she ready to traverse those deep waters? "I want to," Betty finally whispered, as the last brick of resentment crumbled within her. "But this won't be easy." "Nothing worth having ever is," Helen replied softly, her eyes glimmering. "But it's a journey worth taking, not just for you, but for your mother." Looking around the cafe, Betty saw her two worlds colliding, her daughter and her friend who brought remnants of hope. Lily stood smiling, her innocence contrasting sharply with the heavy topic. Chloe nodded in agreement, her face aglow with enthusiastic acceptance. Tomorrow would come with its challenges, but today they were together, and against all odds, moving toward understanding. "Let's meet," Betty said, determination rising within her. "Let's find a way to reopen the doors we've both tried to close." With tentative agreement, they sealed their newfound pact against the uncertainty. The upcoming journey would not be easy, but filled with courage, they were ready to face what lay ahead. The rain outside lightened, the heavy clouds dispersing. There, in that little cafe, beneath the flicker of warm lights and crowded tables, a fragile hope began anew, a family emerging from the shadows. As they stood to leave, Betty realized something profound. Healing took time. Reliving pain was daunting. But together, they had the power to embrace transformation. Trusting and sharing stories with one another would illuminate their entwined paths, breathe life back into dormant connections, and forge bonds that could weather the storms. "You've got this," Lily cheered, her voice bright as she broke the moment of reflection. "Let's start our new story." Betty smiled, radiant with the clarity of their steps forward. "Yes, let's start our new chapter together." With hearts pounding in unity and hope shimmering like sunlight breaking through clouds, they stepped into the world outside. The road ahead was uncharted, but they were ready. Family, history, and love converging under a new sky. Now this is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it helps us a ton. Comment your reactions and feelings about this emotional ending, and make sure you share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this incredible transformation. Don't wait not even one more second to share. True fans understand the importance of supporting our channel through these actions. Join us as we navigate the journey of life and family together.